is why I talk about incorporating how you measure your progress and impact of your racial equity actions as part of a broader ESG framework is down to, well, two things really. So remember, ESG frameworks are now becoming more common in the business world as an opportunity to demonstrate organisations that are taking sustainability seriously. Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not, organisations are just using that as a badge, right, just to tick a box without actually doing the real work underneath it. But I do think ESG, coupled with increased focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, is now being embedded as the language of the business, I guess, in terms of how they communicate their disclosures around how they're managing risk. So remember, ESG is fundamentally about ensuring that there is a conscious decision-making process about the impact on the environment, the social issues, so how employees are treated, how organisations engage with local governments, regulation, their supply chain, etc. And governance is to ensure that there is the right decision making and there is a diversified view around the board to ensure that companies are mitigating the risk of blind spots. Now, this is my explanation of ESG, not a textbook one, but you can Google that. Now, the reason why I will say or always advise people when thinking about how to measure the impact of racial equity actions is because ESG is already a language the business understands. So your board, your investors are used to thinking in terms of ESG frameworks. Now, it doesn't mean that you fit everything to make sure that it can be reported on under the many, many data points, and different institutional investors or fund managers, etc., have slightly different frameworks. But broadly, there are some principles around ESG reporting that's always about how things can be quantified, how they can be proved, how it can be validated, different types of disclosures that you will make, which I'm not going to go into. But racial equity, right, is a risk for organisations that choose to do nothing, right? It is a risk. Because if we're moving to an environment now where we've already seen that institutional investors are setting their expectations, not only to say that they expect to see better ethnic minority representation at board level, but more importantly, they want to see the plans that are driving that. So we're going back to what you've heard me talk about before, which is treating representation as an output, not an input. Now, if you don't have a plan around that, if you don't have a plan or a mechanism of being able to track issues of racial discrimination right up until board level, if you cannot demonstrate what you're doing to be part of the solution, not from a moralistic perspective, but because this is the way that society is heading, that is a risk. So if you, as a chief people officer or a chief diversity officer, is thinking about how you can best ensure that you're positively influencing the board to keep giving you the leeway, keep giving you the resources, keep giving you the support that you need to make the decisions that are going to lead to truly inclusive environments, do you know what I mean? So incorporating racial equity, incorporating issues that affect other minoritized colleagues, the easiest way to do that is to wrap it around something that the business is already used to talking about. Now, my only caveat around this is don't get so caught up in making sure that you can quantify what you're doing in data points that you forget to also hone in on the experiences and the experiences as told through the voices of your colleagues in terms of how what you're doing is positively impacting them and making a difference. Because what you can have quite quickly is if you have things like, do you have a leadership development program for Black colleagues, for example? Are you measuring graduate intakes from other ethnic minority populations, all of these traditional metrics, then measuring that metric alone doesn't mean anything in terms of being able to demonstrate that it's dismantling racism or that this is leveling the playing field for your Black colleagues. You can put black colleagues on a leadership development program. But if there's no follow on in terms of the measure and impact that says, well, where are they going after they've done this leadership program? What's different to them? What P&L budget control do they have? What's their level of influence? How many of the promotions have you given have been black colleagues? What have you done around the pay discrepancies? You know, what positions have they gone to? What projects have you got them involved in? What's the size of their budgetary responsibility in pounds, shillings, in pence, etc., etc.? So you can see it's very easy on paper to look like you've made progress just by doing, but you're missing the opportunity to also measure impact. And sometimes impact cannot be quantified in pure data points that you can fit nicely in a spreadsheet. You need to get the narrative, you need to understand and be checking in and putting the feedback loops from your actual employees to say, this is where we started when we began our anti-racism journey and we decided we wanted to commit to be different and be better. These are the things that we've put in place. How is it feeling for you now in comparison to then? And rather than having that as a one-off feedback loop, think about how you can continuously do that and how you can continuously take that information and put that together with the quantifiable data. You know, how many training hours, etc., etc. The ESG frameworks love because, you know, it's nice and easy, and also the information is publicly available. And so what you're also doing is you're helping mesh and help make it easier for your leadership teams or your corporate affairs director to be able to connect the dots with what you're doing internally with what they need to communicate externally. Now, every so often I do run a webinar on this in more detail. So if you've heard this and thinking, oh, actually, you know, I'd benefit from that, you can either wait until I do the next one, which is, you know, I do them every so often. I will do another one before, you know, I break up for summer. Or there is an on-demand replay version, is charged because it's not free. This is gold dust that I'm giving you. So let me know and I can just send you the link. It's literally £50 to access it, so it's not going to break the bank. But I just talk through in more detail how you can, and some of the example measures and how you can incorporate that. So I just wanted to make that point because I'm still hearing time and time again that people are struggling to measure impact. They don't know what measures to pick, but also some of the measures are vanity measures. Some of the measures aren't truly measuring impact, and also it's hard work for the board of directors, the company secretary, the corporate affairs person to connect that together to then go, right, this is what we're going to go out to, you know, to the city or whoever, whichever shareholder they've got to do the updates with. So I'm all about trying to simplify what we do, because if we can do that, we have a better chance of being able to maintain the course and do the continuous work that's needed to ensure that we bed in racial equity and ultimately that we're creating racially just workplaces. So I hope that helps.